I think both sides are like incredibly similar. And if the engineers would just realize the creators aren't these, in this stereotype, it always comes up, they're entitled. Their work sucks. I don't like their work, so they shouldn't get paid for it.
Right.
Right? Versus the creatives like, I should get paid for everything that I don't get paid for. So who's right? Is it the creators who got their content taken? Is it the AI developers who say, hey, we need it to create great AI? Or is it somewhere in between? Let's take a listen to the few episodes that we've been exploring this and let me know what you think.
And it comes down to perspective and to how people have developed that perspective. And once they get that, they resist change because they believe they're right. The other side believes they're right. And it's beliefs, right? It's beliefs. And then when you start going inside and you start developing, you start seeing that it's all the same, right? It's just a matter of what degree to what side you're on. And in anything the way it used to be, if both sides could come in and find common ground and build on it, they could start to go somewhere. But they just are stuck in both sides where this is, I believe this, therefore it must be true, and I believe this, therefore it must be true. So they believe they create a truth out of it, and it's not a truth.
The truth? Well, you know, I'm Declan Dunn, and this is the AI Optimist, and the rest we're figuring it out.
I've been in data for decades, right?
Yeah.
I see, and it's starting right now, where you're going to get silos of data. We went away from silos to these data lakes and common, right? We're going to go back to silos where there's specific data in there that's hard. It's true data. And if you want it, you have to pay for it, right? So if you're like, say, in the insurance industry, you're going to pay for the data in this vertical. And it's intelligent because you've built intelligence into it. And if you're creating new drugs, you're going to pay for the data in this silo because it's more valuable. And OpenAI is essentially doing that with their $2,000 to $20,000, pay base of their new AI. And what they're doing with that is, by doing that, they're creating higher end, deeper thoughts in those that start to train that LLM deeper, and it continues the training on it as people use it, but they're using it at a higher level than the average person, right?
Will AGI and superintelligence be available to everybody? Right? No. Is that wrong?
Not really, no. Whether it's right or wrong is an opinion, because there's nothing out there, an authority that says it's right or wrong, right? It's an opinion. And some people are going to think it's wrong. Some people are going to think it's right. And whoever thinks the most is going to win out.
Yes, it is just opinion. You, I, everyone has it. In fact, my opinion is, if we lose the human edge, we're going to lose the great AI that we could have. Because if you lose that edge, you lose out on a lot. You lose showing us what could be, not just what was or what's popular now. What are we going to be like, living in a content social media algorithm feeding us just what we want so we don't actually grow? Couldn't we do this technology a little bit better? The edge isn't just a boundary, it's the frontier of human creativity. And once you lose it, no amount of AI can bring it back. For the few who choose to be creative, because it's not a calling of many, it's hard and rarely gets compensated. It's good to nourish and nurture this, not simply take what they create without reward. And I'm talking about going forward, because they've already taken everything we've created. And unless you're a news publisher with a lot of lawyers, I don't think you're going to get compensated. What can we do then? Let's stop trying to change it, because that one is out the door. Who's creating something you never could even imagine. The Teslas of our day, and I'm not talking about the car. The inventors, the writers, the people who create those movies that aren't just Marvel rehashing of the same characters, but are like the old Marvel comics where each one mattered. Because those comics came out of that kind of soup, of having to be there consistently for years, and all of a sudden, people are like, Stan Lee's amazing. We lose that if it all goes into some AI database. And over time, just becomes an image we can sort of create. Like I created Napoleon Cerrone and Oscar Wilde's photograph badly with Midjourney because it was average. The edge isn't the boundary. The human edge is the source of creativity. Otherwise, we're just spinning the same tunes over and over again. It gets sort of dull. Do you really want 2025 on repeat, or are you ready to build something that we haven't even imagined yet? Because as much as AI can do this, is it going to imagine a better future for us? Or are we just sort of letting it so that a bunch of people in control of what we're doing do whatever they want to do? Abre los ojos, as the film said, open your eyes. And listening to a group of artists led by Sarah Anderson who are trying to make a difference, and the judge found in their favor this time. Well, it led to Judge Orrick giving the artist one small legal victory, turned down 2 parts, one victory, one giant challenge to the AI industry. The artists have only one angle, copyright, to protect them. And the copyright lawsuit was at a point where it could have been dismissed before what's called discovery, where the lawyers sit down and ask questions. This is where they discover what each side has, what's going to be brought into the case and argued, whether it's legal or not, and to bring it to the decision or a settlement. So if it doesn't go to discovery, the AI companies don't have to share anything that's going on. And Judge Orrick said, yeah, it does. He said 2 parts of it. One was the allegations of induced infringement are sufficient, moving the case forward to discovery. Now, the lawyers for the artists can peer inside and examine documents from the AI image generator companies, Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, DeviantArt, revealing more details about their training data sets, their tech, and how we got here in the first place, something private companies don't have to share unless they do something illegal, like maybe violating copyright law. We'll see. Judge Orrick says this is a case where the plaintiffs allege that Stable Diffusion is built to a significant extent on copyrighted works, and that the way the product operates necessarily invokes copies or protected elements of those works. Now, this is not a legal decision. The case has got a ways to go, but it just means it can move forward and have enough merit to warrant that deeper discovery. That's what makes this a huge victory. Now they're going to have to open those black boxes of AI, not only telling us how it worked, but telling the decisions that went through to grabbing those materials. And remember, the Stability Diffusion CEO said, we took them, now we can recreate them and do iterations. I don't know if that's going to have an impact on the case, but law is built on intent, why you did something. And OpenAI, remember, says that it can't create this without copyrighted material and it's not going to pay for it. The intent is actually pretty clear. And maybe that's why Eric Schmidt's getting more hits than he deserves. As Judge Orrick says, whether true and whether the result of a glitch, which is what Stability contends, or by design, which is what the artists contend, will be tested at a later date. The allegations of induced infringement are sufficient. And I can tell you this little victory, remember, this is a big underdog. How are they going to win against these big tech companies whose business model is steal and sue, or at least have lawyers to defend yourself and ask forgiveness later? So even though this is a small victory, this is a crack in the wall of big tech. Dominance, and could lead to more accountability in the future and more respect for the people who create the content. And you know where I found the biggest respect for content? China. In the first case decided of AI copyright infringement from Japan, which is much more open to taking content into its AI and still protected. A Japanese superhero wins an AI copyright case in China?
In a Shanghai courtroom, a Japanese superhero won a copyright battle against AI. Meanwhile, in Tokyo, that same AI could legally devour everything in sight. This isn't just about Ultraman. It's about your work becoming someone else's fuel. And Japan is showing us how it happens.
Look at a model in Japan which is taking in all copyrightable content in the country is allowed to be taken into AI. And what comes out or any impacts is left up to the courts. There's ways to do it. I'm going to go in and show you why Ultraman, one of the biggest characters in Japan, stood up in China and was awarded a copyright violation. And the weird contradiction where Japan allows it to go in there and China says no this time, but with a reason that's really interesting. In Tokyo, right now, AI systems are feasting on copyrightable content within Japan. No permission and no payments, though we're going to get to that a little later. It's actually a decent model. See, for the last few months, I've been focusing on copyright, and engineers have stood up and said, hey, why don't you recognize our case that why we should put copyrightable content in? And I found that the country of Japan, their AI model is run on putting AI copyrightable content into it. That manga you created, that's comics and cartoons. That's legal training data. That song you recorded, fair game for AI. But it's not that simple. There are boundaries and rules around this allowing access to copyrightable content to learn, as long as it doesn't do it to really replicate, to copy it, or to challenge somebody financially. Such an important point. Financial challenge, impact, yeah. But also, is it just copying? Like the US Copyright Office said it was just a roulette wheel. That's what AI is. And the New York Times case seemed to explode the fact that they found 85% of their content coming out of ChatGPT. But wait, there's more to that story. Now, the New York Times versus ChatGPT I've referenced several times, but I also found an interesting comment in my last episode that challenged the way that I framed the New York Times content being able to be pulled out of ChatGPT almost verbatim. I quoted 85%, which was what was quoted in the legal documents. And if you look at them, we'll show you a whole bunch of them from what's called Exhibit J. There's just tons of them. And what you see are these small little snippets. Remember that word. These little snippets, little like pages, they put a sentence or two, said, here's the beginning. Now can you tell me what the next sentence is in the article? These are all using articles printed by the New York Times. And so they showed them, but they were all short snippets. I didn't see one single article, which is what I was prompted by in the comment to take a look at it, because Sven Werner, who runs his own Substack, was talking about New York Times being misleading in the way they positioned it. So I went in and I'll talk to you about the Guy Fieri viral comment that I saw, and that showed a lot of content that was similar. If you're watching on the screen, you can see it. All it is a bunch of text. If you see it highlighted in red, that means what's similar. So here it is. Guy Fieri has, I think it was about an 85% accuracy rating. New York Times says this is one of hundreds. They show example after example and say, look, they're taking all our content. But not once did I see the complete article pulled out, but I didn't even think about it until I went to Sven's blog, who was also looking at it and saying, wait, this is not an entire article. This is a snippet. In fact, what was pulled out, he compared to the actual article. Great article he wrote, by the way. You should read it. And he found about 20% was used. So 20% of the article had 85% violation. But remember, the New York Times was doing all sorts of things to influence the output, including things most of us can't do today. But his argument was that the New York Times also claimed memorization. And he shows within a standard large language model, this is really basic. I should have been looking at this myself. Large language models do what's called reconstruction. They put together different pieces, starting with tokens, putting together words. There's a whole science to it, but nothing is actually sitting there like the New York Times claims in memory. And so he had a great point about memorization, is that that's actually reconstruction of a pattern, because let's say we're looking up Hamlet, to be or not to be. We're going to obviously find that passage. We could probably find the whole play. Now that's non-copyrightable, right? That's old. But the same thing applies to a New York Times article, or especially one written about Guy Fieri that went highly viral on social, that had lots of people writing, commenting, putting stuff out. All of that makes it a higher probability that that content would have been in ChatGPT. So what I got from that Substack article by Swen was an eye-opener that this is not only misleading, but they're not really pulling out full articles. The way they're doing it is not the way a normal user would do it or could do it now. If you paid $20 a month at ChatGPT, I shouldn't say this, some of you are great prompters and hackers, maybe you can do it. But for the general public, it would take an enormous amount of work to try to reproduce what's already been created. This case is not about copying snippets. It's about the New York Times versus ChatGPT and the competition for so many things that the New York Times creates. Of course, they don't want ChatGPT to take it in, and this suit has been going on a while. So remember that right now, there's all sorts of media companies, large ones, that have settled. Axios, Axel Springer. There have been a lot of media companies that have settled with OpenAI. Clearly, what these lawsuits generally end in is licensing. So the one standing, the New York Times, is trying so hard to prove on the output because it usually tells me they can't really prove on the input. And a lot of the scraping and buying of data and billions of data points, ChatGPT may become a news source. ChatGPT may take subscribers away from the New York Times, or at worst, if you could go into ChatGPT and get the New York Times without paying them, that's obviously what all this is about. At some point, they should play together, but judging of the length and the intensity of both sides, and everyone watching this as the case, it's surprising not to see some major licensing deal come out of it, because the texts that they're showing are not yet complete articles, they're snippets. And does AI have the right to show excerpts and portions of things that have been around social media and the cultural milieu for so long, they become almost self-evident, easy to find? Or is that just another AI hustle to avoid the responsibility of the content that went in? When you're working with AI, who gets to call themselves the author? And this brings us back to that 1884 photographer, Napoleon Cerrone. He was taking a picture of the famous poet, Oscar Wilde. You could compare him to like Kendrick Lamar. He was one of the most famous at the time. And he had this image and says, I want to copyright it. Well, cameras were brand new, like AI. They'd already done the printing press, right? That was the first wave of content copyright. Now they do the camera. And that camera turned around and the law said, wait a minute, that's a tool. And the way he set it up, the lighting, the things that go into making it a shot made it human. Could be a little like prompting, couldn't it? In fact, when I took those photos into Midjourney and I said, give me these two next to each other exactly as they are, as best I could, you can see the examples here. They're just duplicates that sort of look like it, but it wasn't able to follow my instruction, which is more a prompt thing. But look at what they did. They turned something unique into something like everything else. That's why creativity matters in AI. Because if we don't have the human element, we're going to get this pushing everything to the middle. See, AI is a probability soup of millions of influences. How do you trace that? How do you compensate it? And more importantly, who owns what comes out? Ownership is really where it gets this messy, because authorship is where it comes from. We can play around with that. Who was important? Was there human involvement? But ownership, that brings in all these different influences and doesn't even talk about the AI developers and the AI platforms that are really important to be able to create this. So if we're in an open canvas kind of thing, we want contribution, getting compensation. It doesn't have to be payment. It can be services, it can be tech, it can be brought into these communities where you share your creativity, your mindset, nurture this talent, grants, scholarships. Make this a positive thing, because the way they interact is going to make that thing smarter. They're going to show you things a bunch of people sitting in a room, especially just engineers, might not see, which is why you see so many bringing in diverse sort of people to work with them. But in the end, the audience is going to shape it. if we let it. And that's where the creative comes in. And that's where the person who's on the edge, not in the center. Because this stuff that's really great doesn't come in the middle. It comes from places we don't expect. How can we encourage that? How can we not only compensate in a way, just give people a chance who really are doing well to find that as a career? Because if we lose just that, wow, just math and engineering, that's just half the world, a great half, but it's not the whole deal.